everybody. It's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we are actually going to begin our discussion on emotional intelligence. Last week, we were starting off on that path, and a fascinating subject popped up that ended up filling the majority of our time. So we just shifted everything over to here. So that's the subject. Now, I think a couple of you that are on the call have got a pretty strong background in the field of emotional intelligence. So by all means, we're going to ask you to give us your insights and more of an in-depth understanding of what this is all about. But let me just be clear from the very beginning that ultimately our goal is to see if emotional intelligence includes any sort of a diagram that we can then see if it overlays on the change grid. If it does overlay on the change grid, to what extent does it overlay? And what difference does it make? Is it useful? Are we enhancing anything about emotional intelligence? Is emotional intelligence enhancing anything we know about the change grid and tension management? So ultimately, that's what this whole circle of brilliance is all about. This is our discussion portion of what ultimately leads to the merging of brilliance, where we do something formal to blend whatever model the circle has been talking about into our official body of layers and insights about tension management and all its ways of expressing itself. So that's what our goal really is. That being said, if we go off on some tangent, I'm willing to go there as long as it's intriguing to everyone who's involved. So, all right. So why don't we start with a definition? This just came out of Oxford Language Dictionary. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. And then I don't know who they gave this quote to, but emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. That could be debatable all by itself, but okay. Now, for those of you with the background in emotional intelligence, how do you come to describe it? I'm particularly interested in how you describe it if you're wanting to talk to a prospect around it. So what is it and why is it important?
This is Peter. What I would say first, I take issue with control. I think manage, because I think it's illusion of control. And I think you control something. I kind of take repressing it, and that's the opposite of what we want to do.
Okay, good. Thank
you.
So
I think manage it would be better if I were to write that dictionary. But anyway, the way I look at it when I work with people, I just say it's kind of like a pyramid, and the bottom of the foundation is self-awareness, and in the body of it is self-mastery, and in the heart of it is interpersonal skill.
All right. And when you're talking to people around this, how do you kind of frame that people have sort of like a current level, if you will, of emotional intelligence? And then is it something that they can consciously improve upon?
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not an etched in stone sort of personality trait.
So it's fairly malleable. IQ is fairly set, but then you could be brilliant but have the EQ of a reptile. But the good news is it can be developed. And empathy is a skill that's hugely impactful. When going to the change grid, if I don't have empathy and I'm a bulldozer, I could put people into overwhelming stress.
Interesting. And again, everyone feel free to chime in on this. Do you find that as we move up in the ranks of business management and leadership, that there is better emotional intelligence or worse emotional intelligence? I know that's a giant generalization, but I'm just kind of wondering.
I think it varies, T. This is Kathy. I think it varies. I think that so many people now, because this concept has been around for so long, so many people have been taught and coached, et cetera, at higher levels that they're aware of it. I mean, when I introduce it, or used to, and have introduced it in the past and continue to introduce in the past, basically I say, it's not the smartest person in the room that's successful. It's the person who can connect most readily with others and enable things to happen. So, I mean, I use very simple language around it and introduce it that way. But I think that in order to be a successful leader in most businesses today, most people need to be able to do this well, which does not say they do, but that, you know, it's really becoming more and more a necessity as organizations level out, and the demands on leaders are to be less the authority figure at the top of the hierarchy and more the coach and facilitator of a flatter organization.
And so do you guys find, or what are your thoughts around the subject of old school versus new school business owners, managers, executives? Was there more or less of what we consider to be emotional intelligence today? Yeah.
I
Any
think they're
thoughts?
probably, at least from what I'm reading in terms of research, probably relying on it more than in the past, just because it was categorized as some, forget the terminology, soft skills is what they called it. Like there was this big gap between some kind of magical firewall, I'll call it, between soft skills and hard skills. And so hard skills would get all of the credit, whereas soft skills are something you put off in the future if you have training for it. And so now they're seeing that there's a site called 80,000hours.org, which is part of Oxford, and they did a longitudinal study of the most employable skills. And the most employable skills is characterized by level of contribution. And I think the top 10 are all soft skills. So it has to do with, you know, the critical thinking, reasoning, or judgment, all these different kinds of things. Has nothing to do with the hard skills.
No. But they're becoming more appreciated, I think. I think they've always been valuable. I think they're just being appreciated more. Probably because, and what I wanted to get to was that because the old way of leading and managing is no longer suitable. People back in the day, if you will, could get away with all sorts of things that today would be considered immoral, if not illegal. And so I think that when we're talking about people that are up in the ranks in management, maybe the emphasis on emotional intelligence is motivated by a cost savings objective. So there aren't, lawsuits, et cetera. I guess I bring it up only because when I started this, okay, I've been doing this business for almost 40 years. Oh my gosh. And I can tell you, over the years, I have met a great many business owners and executives that were absolute jerks. I was shocked that they had even a marginally successful company because they were just truly horrible to their employees. And all the employees were afraid of them, and no one was willing to speak up or anything like that. And so I would see that the energy level of the employees was just, let's say, so suppressed, or had been beaten out of them so much that they would basically show up for work, put in their time, and at the end of the day feel like at least I survived another day. In the early days, I found the biggest problems when I was brought in as a consultant to fix a company. More often than not, the problem was the executive or whoever that brought me in. So anyone have that experience or any stories to share?
Totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
This is David, when I consult, and it's more of an overarching, we haven't really defined the nature of the engagement yet. I often talk to my clients in terms of achieving velocity as an objective. How fast can you get from point A to point B correctly and do so in a constructive way that has a long-lasting effect? And that, I think, is where emotional intelligence comes in, because I've seen people who you would characterize as not emotionally intelligent be highly effective leaders when they do it situationally and use emotional intelligence when it's called for. And they achieve great velocity.
Okay, and so the thought being there that there is some set of behaviors or ways of carrying oneself that are going to be more positively recognized, received, impacting another individual. So is that?
It's plain effective.
Yeah, and that does, so that to me, I go back to this thought that there's a financial benefit to boosting emotional intelligence for a company. It's
Yeah.
not that they're just doing this to be good or to be better people. No, they're doing this
Right.
because it helps their company run more effectively and
Better
efficiently.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, T, what I find too, the Gallup survey interviewed 1 million people, or they surveyed 1 million people, and they asked, why'd you leave your last job? And 4 out of 5 said they left their boss, not their job. And when you look at some of the research from the Center for Creative Leadership, they said one of the biggest reasons for derailment, executive derailment, is the inability to build trusting, collaborative relationships. So this turnover is huge. And I think on a jaded way, I could say that's my job security.
Well, exactly right.
Secure.
No, I'm so glad I didn't have to say that. Oh, yeah. As long as companies continue to be screwed up, we all have a livelihood. Another generation of people like us to come.
I
Hey,
like
this
this
is Peter.
idea.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, Peter. Was
Oh
that Peter?
no, no, that was good. I'm good. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, fine. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I like what I think that was Peter that was talking about managing versus control.
Yes.
Because I was looking at this from a neuroscience perspective of emotions and how emotions are even processed in the brain. And this, if you speak to a neuroscientist, they'll say it's one of the toughest things to study because there's so many different pathways that actually lead to emotions, and those pathways in terms of the difference in emotions and cognition, we're actually designed to give emotions the upper hand. Like the pathways are better connected, it process sensory data almost automatically.
Yes.
And so literally, when people suppress emotions, they're not connected to what's going on either internally or externally, because most of emotions as we experience it happens at a subcortical level. So it happens on an unconscious level, like something's happening to you. And so that's why I said when in the laboratory, when the behavioral scientists would come to the lab, they're saying we're not studying what people call feelings. We want to understand the triggers. That gives us indication of what's going on underneath. And that's where in neuroscience, you connect the dots between both.
Yeah.
So it's really, it follows a pathway of tension management. If you think about it, because there's a behavioral aspect to it, there's a physiological aspect to it, and there's a environmental aspect to it. And you have to see emotion from the totality of all of that, like not just the feeling itself.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the specific emotions part of emotional intelligence, because as I was, I'm always searching the images engine on Google just to see what people in our line of discussions might have already put together. And I stumbled across the one you're seeing on screen right now. I assume you guys are seeing something that says emotional intelligence, low and high. And
Yes.
I just want to go over these lists. And then I want you guys to see if you can tell me, where do these live on the ChangeGrid? So for example, if we just look at the first set, low emotional intelligence would convey aggressiveness, being demanding, egotistical, bossy, confrontational, where higher emotional intelligence would display assertiveness, ambitiousness, drive, being strong-willed and decisive. Okay, does any of that make you think, oh, I know where that is on the ChangeGrid? Anybody?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. If you look at low emotional intelligence, that top group you described,
these top four, yeah.
That to me is the outgrid, danger zone outgrid.
Yeah.
And the high emotional intelligence is more the sort of the first circle of power. that where people, yeah, exactly.
Right. And so
yeah.
all those low emotional intelligence words would tend to be found. And if I brought up the adjective map, I'll tell you several of them, if not all of them, are already listed in this outgrid danger zone adjective set. When we look at the healthier ones, some of them I think are currently plot between the green circle and the red circle. So this is where we are out there actively implementing whatever the work happens to be, because this right here, this band on the engagement rings is where engagement is actually occurring. So some of that, but a lot of it, as Kathy points out, is just this healthier way of one keeping their mind. So let me just go up a slide. We talk about assertive. That's a bit further out grid. Ambitious is a little bit on the in-grid side of things. Driving is probably throughout all of it. Strong-willed, maybe another in-betweener. Decisive, maybe slightly outgrid, but none of these would be in the danger zone. Yet all of these: aggressive, demanding, egotistical, bossy, confrontational. If I'm not mistaken, all of them are already listed there. So can you guys kind of make that connection? Can you feel that kind of overlays when we're looking at the emotions of emotional intelligence? Yes, no?
Absolutely.
Yep,
Absolutely.
okay. So let me give you another one. Let's go to the bottom of the list. For low emotional intelligence: critical, picky, fussy, hard to please, perfectionistic. Where high emotional intelligence would be detailed, careful, meticulous, systematic, and neat. Okay, where do you think that lives on the change grid?
So to me, that's clearly down-grid. You know, that's the analytical side of this, where you're danger down-grid, I would think is more on the left-hand side, where you're basically turning off any kind of communication, you know, critical, picky, fussy, hard to please. And then in the moving up toward the PowerPoint, somewhere in the engagement ring, is where the ones you're pointing at now would lie, I think. I mean,
well, this is what I'm hoping to will hold true as we work our way around it. Yeah. Those the more hardcore: critical, picky, fussy, hard to please, perfectionistic. I mean, if I look at the downgrade danger zone, it's deeply in apathy. This is a person who believes their perceived level of ability is what?
Very high.
Very high. And the challenge that they face is
very low.
Very low. And so I would not be at all surprised to find out that they were easily irritated, and that they felt like there was no reason to even have these discussions, quick to pass judgment because they think they know it all. So very critical, picky, fussy, hard to please, perfectionistic. Yes. Now, as Kathy pointed out, these others would live somewhere between the edge of that downgrade danger zone and the center of the change grid. So when I look at something like careful feels a little bit more mid-grid than meticulous. You know, maybe systematic is someplace in between. So I can see how all of those still live in this analytical quadrant, but above this line that marks the downgrade danger zone. So somewhere in between, we're going to find those. And again, while I haven't pulled it out in preparation for today's call, I know that a lot of these words are on the adjective map. And so, and that's where they would fall. Okay, now, how many of you suspect that if 2 out of these 4, who knows why they're 4, but because I don't know who created this, I don't know who built this, I don't know why they grouped it into 4 blocks, but they did. And so how many of you think, well, if 2 of them are going to find a way to easily overlay on the change grid, what do you predict the other 2 are going to do?
Yeah, I think they all match.
I think we're going to take a look and find out. So let's look at the second grouping here. Easily distracted, glib, not a word we use all that often, selfish. Well, who wants to give a definition of glib?
Just passing something through, easy easy talking. I don't know how to describe it. It's
yeah,
really
see, I learned it as being like
smooth talking,
smooth talking, shallow kind of thing, but it seems like it's coming so easy from the person.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
they're being effortlessly insincere and shallow. That's not
Yeah.
right. No, they're on the surface, it looks like they're being very genuine and all that, but underlying it, not very deeply below the surface, is this insincerity, shallowness, kind of
Okay.
thing. So smooth talking, but don't trust it. Um, okay, so yeah, they can talk a good game. Selfish, a poor listener. Why do you think people in that area are poor listeners? That's going to be a quiz question in just a second. And impulsive, where the more I want to say positive aspects of it would be warm, enthusiastic, sociable. And by the way, at first they were trying to describe these as emotions. And I told you guys last time around that while there are a great many true emotions that you'll find on the adjective map, the majority of the things we've seen packaged as feelings and emotions are actually just adjectives that describe what happens there. So I don't think of sociable as being emotion, or as even being about, maybe it's a bit of a feeling more than anything else. It's kind of like an interactive skill or a
Those are
behavior.
traits. Those are
Trait. Yeah, there
traits.
you go.
They're not emotion. Yeah, I meant to send you. I have an emotion map for this.
Yeah, well, I actually found one too. I'll show you guys in
Good,
just a
good,
second. I
good.
found one that I
Those
thought.
are traits. They're not emotions.
Yeah, and that's why I go back to, I don't know why they call this intelligence emotional intelligence, because a lot of what they are actually talking about and highlighting in emotional intelligence writing and work is really working with something that isn't a strict emotion. And I have no problem with that. I just think it's interesting that they chose as a brand to refer to it as emotional intelligence, even though it includes so many other sorts of things. Anywho, so warm, enthusiastic, sociable, charming, and persuasive. Where might these all live on the change grid?
Those are up in power, power, moving into power stress, but
Yep.
but because that, I mean, to me, they totally correlate to the social styles.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, so that's how it's very easy for me so they're going to be up grid, but you know, the others are going to be really up grid.
Yeah, and so here we have, we got our driver up here. We have the
Yeah.
expressive, and so these
Expressive
all
driver,
tend to be traits of an expressive.
right.
Now, easily distracted, glib, selfish, poor listener, and impulsive are not in the danger zone. That's the only thing I think is different from what we're looking, because I think the true danger zone upgrid has got a whole unique set of situations that tend to be there. That being said, I would say that easily distracted, glib, selfish, poor listener, and impulsive are further upgrid than warm, enthusiastic, sociable, charming, and persuasive.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and we certainly know that one of the hallmarks of power stress is that there's an impulsiveness. That's the caveat. When we are working with someone who's in power stress, we know that there is a possibility that whatever decisions they're making and actions they're taking are the result of impulsiveness, driven by whatever external factors are actually generating the level of tension they're experiencing. Easily distracted, absolutely. Glib, but I want to talk specifically about glib and charming for a second, because I think there is a pretty fine line between glib and charming. Now, if whoever put this together doesn't understand the transition between the expressive sorts of qualities and the driver sorts of qualities, then they might just go like, well, that one fell there. That's just where we're putting it. But I want to explore it a little bit more detail to kind of lock this in. But generally speaking, do you guys agree? These tend to be more upgrid. Other words, by the way, for the expressive quality, this is in disc, this would be the high I type. sort of traits we would find there. So this is more definitely the social, the socializer in some of these other models. So every quadrant-based personality system has got something that's going to be this exact thing we're talking about when we characterize it as expressive sorts of traits. Anything you guys want to throw out before we get into the deeper lesson here? Nope. Okay. Here's what I want to bring to your attention. The upgrade danger zone is really a situation where your perceived level of ability is dramatically lower than at the time you wish it was. So you are in a real difficult, challenging, perhaps even life-threatening situation. At that point in time, I don't think that you're going to be all that glib, if you will, easily distracted. I don't know that you're easily distracted as much as you're wholly focused on whatever is threatening you. And being a poor listener, it's because you're completely consumed by what's going on to save your own butt. So I'm not surprised that we see some of that selfish stuff goes, but these are nowhere near as dramatic as what we would expect to find in the true upgrade danger zone. We would, though, find these words up here in that somewhat healthier stress kind of area and this uppermost area of power stress. I can very much see those words coming into play. When we start looking at the more positive aspects of this, seeing warm and enthusiastic, sociable, charming, persuasive, well, warm feels a bit more closer to the PowerPoint than enthusiastic does.
Mhm.
You guys agree with me on that? And
Yeah.
persuasive to me always has an element of a desired outcome being clearly in mind. I'm persuading you or attempting to persuade you to do something. And so I think that that persuasiveness feels like it's right up against that, the start of that driver kind of energy as well. You guys agree with me on what I'm sharing here?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now, again, I didn't pull out the adjective map because I wanted to come at this from a different direction, but I'm going to ask you guys a quiz question. So, pardon me, I'm going to give you a scenario. You might have heard this from your training because I have repeated the exact same things quite, thousands of times over all these years. So some of you have definitely heard this. So here's your scenario. You have a friend who's been putting together the business event of the year, and everybody who's anybody is going to be there, executives, business owners, anyone and everyone you can possibly think of. They've paid a lot to be there, whatever it is, it's all fancy, blah blah blah. Well, your friend, who's the meeting planner for this whole thing, calls you up at the last minute and says, hey, I got a chair for you at one of the tables. And so you're going to be sitting at this table with all these business owners, et cetera. And you're thinking, oh my God, my line of work, this is exactly the kind of people I would like to meet. So tell me what your immediate response might be with your friend's invitation for you to come to this event. And by the way, you probably only have a couple of hours to get your act together and head over to the venue. So what do you think is happening with your level of tension?
Up.
It's going up. Why is it going up?
Well, the unknown.
The unknown is there. What else? We say so. Sometimes we're upgrade because there is this unknown element that gives us some level of concern. What else happens upgrade?
High expectations.
High expectations. There's a lot of anticipation and excitement and the thrill of whatever it is that's going on. This also lives upgrade. So sometimes being upgrade carries with it risks, dangers, chances being taken that one does not feel really prepared for. And there could certainly be some of that in this particular situation as I've just characterized it. But there could also be this, hey, I'm getting to go to this real fancy kind of thing in this real fancy venue and I'm meeting all these great people and, whatever it is. So I can see where there might be a blend of emotions around it, but they're all upgrade emotions, none of which are in the danger zone. Because if the emotions put you in the danger zone, what would you say to your friend?
No way, I can't do it.
Yes, thanks for the invite, but no. I'm busy. I'm clipping my toenails tonight, you know? So you'd find some way to get out of going because you feel that threatened by it. Now, all that being said, you now arrive at this event and sitting at this table, it's a 10 top, are 9 people, each of whom are the absolute best possible prospect you could ever hope for. Now, how many of you might be a little bit annoyed with your friend because they could have given you a better heads up? What might you have done with that better heads up? Who these people were and that this event was happening. What might you
A
have
little
done?
background research.
Little background research. Now, why would we want to do a little background research if we're going to be going to an event like this with 9 top prospects sitting at our table?
Don't waste any time.
Don't want to waste any time. We want to have engaging, meaningful conversation. We want to have all that. And sadly, your friend either didn't have the opportunity or wanted to just surprise you in a way that they would find amusing and you would find somewhat disconcerting. But nevertheless, there you are. There you are. And so, how would you rate your ability in that particular situation? How would you rate your ability to turn that table into great opportunities for you moving forward? And how challenging do you think it's going to be? So in that scenario, where might you be on the grid?
Medium ability, high challenge.
Medium ability, high challenge. All right, so there you are, medium ability, high challenge. You are on the border between being a driven expressive and an expressive driver. And so when I use words like trying to be influential, trying to be persuasive, does that feel like those words would be in the domain of adjectives you would anticipate someone experiencing in these 2 little subquadrants? Yes, no, silence is confirmation. So just so you guys know.
I would say so, T.
Yeah, now let's add to that. Brian, what's going on with my neurotransmitters now? I've got some endorphins going, yeah?
Yes,
What else?
adrenaline.
Yeah, I've got some adrenaline going.
Modest adrenaline, not much, but modest.
Right. So is there any dopamine happening? Maybe
The
not.
anticipation, probably not that high because you're not exactly sure, but you're anticipating something.
Right. And so think about that. Even if it's just endorphins are going and adrenaline is going, well, that means a lot of my physiological aspects are going up as well. So I'm probably thinking faster, talking faster, moving faster. My pulse rate and blood pressure are probably elevated. And so I'm in a situation that may not be dangerous, but is uncomfortable. Peter, you've unmuted. What would you like to throw in?
Yeah, I was thinking the mindset. So a lot of it would depend on my sense of confidence and my mindset to say, wow, I'm going to make the most of this. And as a result, I'm going to have this kind of impact on my business. And I think my mindset would determine where I am on the grid.
Exactly. Now, what Peter just did was say he would perform his own what kind of maneuver?
Downgrid?
His own downgrid maneuver, because they would be restoring resources. Because he's talking about, I've got to reclaim my confidence in this situation. So yeah, I wish I had been informed of this. I would have prepared better. But you know what? I'm not new to the game. So I've bumped into people in social settings before that I didn't know I was going to bump into. And, so I think that he's absolutely right. I got to get my mind in the right place. So now we're talking about that. Tim, you feel free to just unmute yourself and chime in whatever you'd like.
Yeah, T, I wanted to ask Brian, what role would the amygdala play in this scenario?
Well, Peter described it actually, because when you have any adrenaline rush or that first phase of any kind of emotion happens at that level. So it's very mechanistic. And that's why I like the word, and I can appreciate what they're saying with reference to intelligence, because it takes a certain amount of stepping back and understanding how to reframe things in the moment. That's essentially what emotional intelligence is, what Peter just described. Because think about where, again, when you're talking about how the brain processes emotions, all our senses go up the brain stem. That's called bottom up, whereas top down moves our our body parts, right? And so if you think about how we're positioned to experience the emotion, we're not meant to suppress it. That's why you don't have to think if you touch a hot stove. You get a sensation, your body knows what to do, right? So when you think about what's in that midbrain, the amygdala, long-term memory, so you have hippocampus, the thalamus, hypothalamus. So all these, again, processes that happen underneath the radar of our awareness.
Yep, yep.
Is very mechanistic. So without that capacity to actually step in and do some reframing or use the Diane Buffin method, you're just hijacked, literally. Yep. Amygdala hijacking.
Well, and let me add to that, that if I pulled out the adjective map right here at the intersection, and I'm going to give you the descriptors of these 4 subquadrants, at the intersection of the driven expressive, the expressive driver, the amiable driver, and the analytical expressive. Okay, so that's kind of a very interesting energy. Right there, you will find creative problem solving happens right here on the ChangeGrid, creative problem solving. Now, don't be confused with artistic creativity. Artistic creativity lives further down grid, happens best in more of a relaxed kind of state, because there is a real analytical element to artistic work of any sort. So that's there. Problem solving, creative problem solving is here. And isn't that what's happening when you're sitting at this table, these 9 people, you're kind of going like, well, it's not like a problem, like I gotta like figure it all out or I'm in deep trouble, but I am sitting at a table with 9 puzzles. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they do. I don't know. I'm surrounded by these puzzles. And so obviously something in my mind is driving me to explore these things. Otherwise, I'm a pretty lousy business owner, a pretty lousy salesperson. It's like, come on, we want to do all those kinds of things. But here's the question that I wanted to throw at you. Obviously, you're rating your ability as being moderate and the challenge as being quite high. What does a human being use as a replacement for knowledge, skill, and experience when they find themselves in a situation where their ability is less than they wish it would be in them at that moment? What do we do?
Charm.
We become charming. So this, yes, go right ahead.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, fake it till you make it. So this is where that whole world of being charismatic, being charming, being, if you look at the adjective map, there you will find the word smooth, and it's spelled with 4 O's on the adjective map. So this is it. Because one of the things that we know and people will very commonly do when they're here on the ChangeGrid is because they don't feel prepared to have the spotlight put on them, they have a tendency to put the spotlight on who?
Others.
Everybody else. So all these other 9 people at the table are going to suddenly be the stars of that table, the big show, if that person is smart in what they're doing. If they would be far more inquisitive, because right now, if any one of those 9 people asks them, well, what is it that you do? Do you kind of feel like, ooh, I don't want to have to give a generic answer. I want to give an answer based on what I know about these other people who are sitting at the table. So in the world of introductions, a savvy person at this location on the ChangeGrid would always want to go when in the order? Last. And by the end of it, this is what they really, really want to do. By putting everyone else at the center of the attention, there's a lot of beneficial things that are happening. Number one of which is that you are now not in the, in the spotlight. Now, I shared with you guys a story about me and Linda going to Niagara-on-the-Lake in Canada to go to a theater festival with for reasons I won't get into, total strangers. And but we knew, because friends gave them their tickets, friends couldn't meet, couldn't go, it was a weekend plan, whatever, blah blah blah. We knew we would be sitting next to these people for umpteen different theater performances, which means we would be going out for drinks or dinner before, after, whatever, with these people. We decided we were going to spend all of our energy getting to know these people as well as we could. So they became kind of like the center of our attention. And at the end of it, we knew everything about these people, but they had asked us little or nothing about us. We get feedback from our friends that tells us that these people, this couple we were with, thought that Linda and I were the two most interesting people they'd ever met. Yet they never asked us anything about us. So what are we really earning when we put the spotlight on other people? We're earning a whole lot of highly desirable traits that we really, didn't put forth any real evidence of, other than the fact that we were genuinely curious about other people. So I bring all that up just to say, if we go back to this little list of things, pardon me one moment.
Hey, T, quick question.
Yes,
So
go right ahead.
a person that's considered glib, would their perceived ability be even lower, since charm is more out, it has a higher level of ability?
Yeah, charm, I think, is earned, and glib is stolen. So I think the people who are perceived as being glib, and we've all met these people, so they're in love with themselves, they're name droppers, they make these sweeping kind of statements, and there's no substance underneath them. Well, once they're exposed, or once we even suspect that they aren't to be trusted, what happens to your assessment of them?
Plummets.
It plummets, and it stays that for a very long time. Where someone who's really charming, that's a quality of attraction. They are charming, and one of the things that makes them charming is how much attention they put on you. As opposed to the glib person who really wants the attention on them. I think the charming person is considered to be charming because they're able to charm others, and that means attract them to you and awaken something in those people that's a little bit magical.
Where would you place most politicians?
At glib. I would place a handful of leaders of any sort from any field that have earned a truly charming, sociable, warm kind of personality. This is the real deal. When you can meet one of these people, you've met the real deal. Their enthusiasm isn't over the top and artificial. While they're persuasive, driven by a mission and a purpose, where someone who's over here in glib and all that may very well be after something that's purely to satisfy their own selfish sorts of outcomes. So yeah, so I think that most people are trying.
Is that the equivalent of?
No, go right ahead. I was going to say
Is that the equivalent of the glib? Is the equivalent of the what's the term, charlatan?
Well, I do believe that effective charlatans would certainly be described as glib too. Yeah, because they're fakers. Okay. That's the whole thing. Yeah. And for people who are easily deceived, they might fall under the spell of that glib, selfish kind of way of carrying oneself, where someone who's a true leader, they are warm. They're not being warm. They are warm. They're not being enthusiastic. They are enthusiastic. They are sociable. They are charming. They are persuasive. This is part of the essence of who they truly are. And this is the person who, well, as Linda pointed out, faking till they make it, trying too hard, because they feel negatively about themselves based on their personal assessment of their level of ability. They're trying too hard to compensate for it because they're too worried about sorry, I'm clicking the wrong direction, about how they're going to be perceived as others. Where the person who's on this high side of things is probably more likely to go, look, I am what I am, warts and all. And so, let's just be genuine. So I think that there's a certain more authenticity on this side than there is on the other. Because here's the thing we all know. there is if glib is a little bit further upgrade closer to stress, the person who is right here in that heart line, you guys aren't at that table trying to do something selfish or whatever. You were just caught a little bit off guard and go like, but hey, you know what? I am who I am. I've done what I've done. If you follow Peter's direction there, you would do something to reclaim the confidence that you have demonstrated and earned in prior experiences. And there you are. The other thing is that the person who is a good expressive driver is really good at asking questions. So now those questions aren't what the analytical driver might be asking. And honestly, at the event I've just characterized, how many of you believe that talking too much about business would be inappropriate anyway?
Yeah.
And so this is really about being social and engaging and all that. And an expressive driver is very good at that by nature, or they learned it, whatever the case may be.
Hey,
Okay.
hey
Yeah,
T.
go
So
right ahead.
I was listening to Learned Optimism by Seligman this weekend. So that's also looks like it can also vary along the lines of one is more pessimistic and one is more optimistic.
Yeah, well, and certainly that pessimism would pull me into one or more danger zones. Optimism doesn't live in any of these danger zones. It lives in a place where something is going to change. Obviously, I'm optimistic about something. So I think it's one of these more developmental sorts of opportunities that surround us when we're at the center of the change grid. That's where, to me, any kind of optimism is. Because I always think that I'm optimistic. Even saying that phrase implies that someone else has identified some downside to what might be going on. I'm being optimistic. I can't be optimistic in a perfect situation, right? Because if the situation was already perfect, why am I being optimistic? It's just, it's like, I'm done. Optimism won. Here we are, so yeah.
T, it reminds me also that servant-minded leadership, a kind of place of caring. I didn't see caring on there, but I think that could be on there, where I'm, servant-minded caring, getting to know some folks, and from a kind of concern, trying to help them maybe be their better selves or be more successful.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see care is going to come up in our last little section to look at. Although I would suggest to you that with warmth, there's a certain caring element that comes along with that as well. So yeah, and again, they've given us a very short list of emotions. The adjective map has room for, what's 12 times 12? 1,440 adjectives. So, and I think we've got about 1,000 on it right now. Okay, so now we have this last little bit. So the only place left is in-grid. And so the question is going to be twofold. Do these things happen in-grid, period? And second, are any of these describing the in-grid danger zone? And so the low emotional intelligence set, resistant to change, okay, passive, unresponsive, slow, and stubborn, where the high expressions would be patient, stable, predictable, consistent, and a good listener.
I put that at the center of the change grid, T.
A lot of this is very close to the center of the change grid. Certainly stable, I would say, is at the center of the change grid. But if I think about some of these, patient, good listener, predictable, I still feel in-grid is accurate, but a little bit more on the out-grid side of things, more of a driven sort of an amiable. And I'm saying that because a lot of these things seem to have some intention. I'm being a good listener. I'm being patient. So that means I'm in some sort of a situation. I'm being consistent. So I think that's what I'm saying. Like, I think there's a bit more of an intention in some of these emotions. I dare say whoever put this together isn't dissecting it to the level we are, but that's what we do. But look at the flip side, resistant to change. Is someone in the in-grid quadrant resistant to change?
Yes.
Yeah. How is that different than resistance to change? We might find more upgrid or more downgrid. Where are people resistant to change in a dramatic kind of way? Yeah, I bring that up only because keep in mind, and again, if you guys will just look at this in-grid quadrant for a second, what makes the in-grid quadrant very unique among its three other companions is that all 5 levels of tension are present in the in-grid quadrant in the exact proportions they would be if we went across the entire change grid. It's just a much smaller world. And so there could be a little bit of resistance, a bit upgrid. So if your level of ability was a 1 and your challenge you were facing was a 5, I could hear a little bit of resistance coming in there because there's a little bit of, you're not afraid. I mean, but there might be a little bit of anxiousness coming into play, anticipation that has a negative kind of element to it coming into play. So I can kind of see a little bit there. And downgrade, if you thought your ability was a 5 and the challenge was a 1, you know, maybe this task would be something you would consider to be a little bit routine. So, but I don't know you're going to resist in either case as emphatically as you would if you were truly downgrade in apathy or truly upgrade in stress. Do you guys agree with me on that? Thoughts
Yeah.
about that? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a smaller world. And so I can kind of see where there would be some resistance to change, but I could say true resistance to change is in the danger zones of other locations on this two others. Being passive, that feels spot on right.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be passive. Again, we find, although they may not perceive themselves as such, comparatively speaking, their level of projected self-esteem is just not going to be as noticeable. I mean, an outgrid person has great self-esteem and they don't hesitate to let you know why, if asked. You know, they're in the danger zone, we got problems, but you get the idea. They own it. They're very confident, very self-assured, very assertive. That's all great. Well, I think people in the in-grid danger zone, they live in a smaller world. So there might also be some of that confidence, some self-esteem, particularly for those that are driven amiables. They've got a mission that they're working on. But if we talk about the truly amiables, being friendly is about all they feel like they have to offer. There's not much else. There's no driver energy. There's no expressive. There's no analytical. So they're just being the pleasant. Linda and I recently finished watching a series on Paramount Plus, or what are they, All Access? It used to be CBS All Access, called Why Women Kill. Have any of you seen Why Women Kill?
No.
Okay, it's by the same guy who put together Desperate Housewives. It is extremely well written, extremely well acted. It really is an amazing story. But in it, you kind of see what happens when someone ends up being put into the amiable box and is expected to simply stay there. So that gives nothing away, but you know, there you have it. So if you get a chance to watch Why Women Kill, it's fantastic. It's kind of a very serious comedy sort of thing around it. Lucy Liu is in it, if you're familiar with Lucy Liu.
Yep.
Okay, anywho, so when I go back to these adjectives that I'm seeing here, unresponsive, I think that when we look at the survival skills, the person who's upgrid is going to flee if possible. The person who is outgrid is going to, give me another F word. What do you think they're going to? They're going to fight. The person who's downgrid, you got 2 left, fade or freeze. Are they going to fade or freeze?
Fade.
Actually, they tend to freeze.
Freeze. Ooh.
Yeah,
They have
because they
so
tend to
much
become
knowledge.
motionless.
Mm-hmm.
Where this person wants to step out of it, step backwards, fade into the background.
Yeah.
But again, these are all neighbors. So if you're at one of these, in one of these danger zones, you guys all know you're darn close to all of them. So who knows? You might freeze, fade, fight, flee, and jump around through all of them because again, you're trying to save your butt from whatever predicament you happen to be in. But generally speaking, we think of the in-grid quality at its worst as being the wallflower wanting to retreat. And so the thought that they would tend to be unresponsive, slow, absolutely. I don't think so much stubborn, other than the in-grid danger zone is the domain of passive aggressive behavior. So if we could say they are inwardly stubborn, not so much outwardly stubborn, then again, I'll tell you, you make sure you watch Why Women Kill. So yeah. It's really, really a good show. Okay, so
actually, every single one of the characters could fit into a very interesting place on the ChangeGrid. So it's a study. It's a real study in people, who they are, how they react, how they act. That's what's fascinating.
It's really well constructed, you know, not to give you guys too much of a big commercial for the whole thing, but there's not a lot of exceptional TV that's out there, and we tend to try to give things a try. We didn't want to watch it because if you just watch the trailer for Why Women Kill, you're just going to dismiss it as being nothing worth watching. We thought we'll give it one episode and just see. We probably sat there for a good 3 episodes before we did it. So it's exceptional. It's just exceptional. So check it out. Check it out. Okay. So bottom line, where we are before we end for today is this little list of emotions, low and high. I don't know who to give credit to. Nowhere is there's an attribution for this if you go searching for these images. But boy, that certainly seems to bring us into some sort of an overlay possibility on the ChangeGrid. Well, the other thing that I found, 2 other things that I found that I'd like to look at next time around, as far as overlay goes, is this one. And this did come from Goldman's work about, I'm going to go from, is there a direction? Self-awareness ultimately wants to get me to relationship management. And along the way, I may go to social awareness. I may move into self-management. So, you know me, you show me a quadrant system and I'm going to see if it overlays. And so we're going to see, does this overlay? If so, to what extent does it overlay? Is it confined to a smaller sort of a vantage point or a strike area on the ChangeGrid? What's going on there? The other thing that I found goes to what Kathy said a while ago. Here's a map of emotions. At least they're saying these are emotions. And they're arranged energy versus pleasantness. And I will tell you that I found this particular chart used by many, many people in many, many diagrams, but none of them contained any kind of attribution to who put this together and for what purpose. So I think it's very interesting to kind of see, do these overlay on the ChangeGrid and where might they be? Yeah. So, and I don't know if they're arranged by opposites. I don't know. We're going to have to play with this. The opposite of enraged would be serene. Where does serene live on the ChangeGrid? Where does enraged live? Where is despair? Where is ecstasy? And then they're saying at the exact center of the ChangeGrid, this is where it falls apart. Could be pleasant, at ease, but am I apathetic? Am I peeved? So, don't know about all this, but I thought it's a nice chart. Let's see where it takes us. Okay, if any of you are familiar with this diagram and you can find an attribution or more of a backstory behind it, I'd love to know what it is. Or if you know anything about this whole emotional intelligence, high, low, and why they grouped it as these quadrants. So if you can find this and find any attribution, I would love to know. I guess I just have to say this. This feels like it overlays perfectly on the ChangeGrid with a few exceptions. So I want to know what the backstory is behind this. I want to know, were they kind of connecting this to personality types and saying this is how the emotional intelligence might express itself in someone that's a high D type or a high I type? You would think there'd be some attribution to it, but there is a backstory here I would love to explore further. Okay, anywho, did you guys find this interesting?
Yep.
Very.
Very
Yep.
much so.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Good, good, good. Well, we'll continue on Thursday. Any final comments he wants to throw out?
Have a great day.
All right, thanks everybody. Bye for now. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, bye-bye.
Bye, bye, everyone.
Bye.